Welcome back to Big Sisters in STEM. My name is Jasmine.
My name is Alice.
And today we're joined by two lovely guests. We've got Natalie and Esther. Hi, guys.
Hi.
How are we feeling today?
Yeah, great. Weather is amazing.
Isn't it?
I know. I'm kind of scared. I'm expecting it to rain really bad at some point soon.
Yeah, I have the fear. I'm I love it so much. I'm scared that it's gonna go.
Oh, you mean like a false spring? You know, when it feels like spring started and actually
I think there's usually about 3 false springs. So
Really?
don't get too optimistic.
Scientifically speaking, there are 3 false springs.
When we get out of this recording, though, it will still be sunny. We'll have a nice.
It's going to be sunny all day today. I think
it?
it's going to
Yeah?
rain tomorrow, actually.
Okay,
But then it's Manchester.
normal. Yeah, we can't expect anything else.
Yeah, today we've got a beautiful day. And it's very nice to be joined by you guys. Thank you so much for making the time to join us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
We've got so much that we want to talk about, but one of the first things that I wanted to say is how you guys met one another. I thought that would be a really great place to start.
2 summers ago,
Yeah.
Esther came to work on a work experience placement in our lab at the university in the Williamson building. And you were there for 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks in the summer.
Yeah.
So it was for Nuffield, which was this program for working class students to get experience in science fields. And so that was my first experience, doing work experience in STEM, and my first time doing geoscience as well, because I'm a physics student. So I got to do a different topic, which was really exciting. But yeah, it was one of the best experiences I had, and it made me want to come to this uni, and it made me want to study physics. And I was really certain I wanted to do this as my job after being in the lab with Natalie. It was amazing.
Wow.
In the lab.
Well done.
In the lab. I thought I was going to
In
be
the
a
lab
little
at
room in a
17.
corner.
So it's a Rock Defamation Lab. So we actually do mostly rock physics is the term for it. So it's the applied side of physics. So a lot of what Esther was measuring were physical properties of rocks.
And that feeds into what you do normally.
Yes.
So you've got a bit of insight into Natalie's world.
So we do we measure the physical properties of rocks, so the elastic properties, because rocks are actually elastic. With the strength of rocks, and then I do a lot of stuff on the chemistry of rocks, so chemical transformations of rocks at temperature when they're under the earth. So we have a lot of very exciting high pressure machines in the lab. And we showed Esther some of these. These are a little bit more complex to use.
Kind of mind-blowing.
She let me use technology. I feel like I should never have been the same room. What was that? Was it the electron microscope that you had me use, and then the next day someone else broke it?
Yeah. She used a multi-million-pound piece of kit. That was not under my. That was with the technician.
Disclaimer.
But yeah, we managed to get her into other labs to do some other tests on the rocks she was looking at with us, and that included getting on a scanning electron microscope. So that's where you can take photographs of anything really, but using electrons to image the rocks in this case, but people do it on insects and all sorts of butterflies'
so
wings.
cool.
You get amazing pictures,
So
but you use a stream of electrons and then you hit those into a material, and you can actually then image it. And so I get very excited by scanning an electron microscope because you're the first person to ever see what you're looking at down the microscope. And for me, it's a little bit like the excitement of if you were looking at a new planet. It's like, wow. And it's this, you can see crystal structures and all sorts of things. So, and I don't know. Esther, actually, I think you found some stuff actually in one of the rocks. You found a zircon.
Yeah, we found zircon and different minerals in it, and it was so cool and so daunting because it feels so simple when you're doing it, and then you realise after walking out that's to a scale that you're never supposed to see and never supposed to experience, and it's just so it's mind-blowing.
Is it beautiful?
Really beautiful.
Well.
I mean, there's lots of competitions that people enter with images, and tends to be insect things,
Really?
But,
Enter to me rocks.
Yeah, I've had images published before.
Wow.
They're really, really lovely. They're all kind of grayscale, but you can colour them up with chemistry on there, and but you drive the machine, so you move in these, £100,000 detectors, and you can crash them, and that's where we've had. Some people have crashed them,
but it wasn't me.
Not you guys.
So when the technician Lewis said, "Why don't you drive, Esther?" Because he was very impressed with Esther's grasp of the how the actual electron microscope worked, because Esther's a very gifted student, which is why she obviously got onto Nuffield, the Nuffield work placement scheme. So there's, I think the year that Esther did it, there was 900 applicants, and there was only about...
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you have to be very
Did you know
high.
that?
God.
Did you know that now? Is this the first you're hearing that?
Yeah, I didn't realise it was
so
that
in the
sensitive.
northwest, so that's across the northwest. So universities offer places, also some companies, but it's actually to do a lab-based experience. You know, research. And it needs to be research that's live. It's not just set them up a project to do. So Esther's work did contribute to the work I was doing.
Wow.
But yeah, hugely, it's very oversubscribed by very good students, and then Nuffield picks a certain number to go forward. And I think you had to do some kind of training before you came.
Yeah, there was like, you have to like learn about like lab reports, you have to learn about posters, and also how to act when you're on the placement. It was like a week-long video essays that you like go through. And so then obviously they send you off after you've completed all the training. You have to do a bunch of quizzes for it. And I think you also have to like write an application, like a personal statement to get onto it in the first place as well. So it was pretty substantial to get on, I guess.
Wow. How many people had picked?
So I think they had 240 places that year for people to go on to, and I think the University of Manchester was hosting about 30. Wow. So my aim was to try. We then hosted 2 students last year as well.
Yeah.
So my aim is to try and get more people at Manchester engaging with the Nuffield scheme. It is hard because it's 2 weeks of commitment of supervising.
You mean from the academic side?
From the academic,
Yeah.
although, you know, technicians are very keen to get involved in my experience. You do need DBS checks because Esther was under 18.
I had a baby, so...
Yeah, so...
What do you mean? No, a student had to sit with me.
The university was struggling with DBS checks at the time. They didn't get through our checks in time, so they hired another student to be Esther's chaperone.
Yeah, chaperone would be nice.
Did you feel very kind of fancy?
Yeah, she was so sweet.
Did they take your bags?
No, not that much, but I think it was really helpful because she helped me like learn about the uni.
Yeah.
And so she took me around to like during breaks. We went to lunch and we went to different parts of the like different departments and different buildings.
Really nice,
she was like sneaking
actually.
me into the physics building as well. She's like, "This is where you'd be if you studied here and stuff." So it was a really good
And
experience.
she got paid for that work as well, so that was nice too. It
Wow.
kind of worked around. Also, I think she was like an accountancy
Yeah, she was an
student,
accounting student.
and so she got to learn a lot about rocks.
Oh my god,
Well,
what
she
a random
wanted to
side
or
quest for
not.
her.
So you just said that she showed you the physics building and was like, "Oh, you could imagine yourself here if you came here." What did you know that it would probably be physics at this point that you'd want to do and pursue?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to do physics. Like
Yeah.
from the get-go. It's that cliche thing, oh, I wanted to be a scientist when I was 7, but like I wanted to be a scientist.
Yeah,
when I was-
because your dad bought you a telescope when you were 7,
yeah,
was
7
it?
years old.
Wow.
Because I was really into science at that age, and I was obsessed with this encyclopedia. I just had that was my childhood book. My parents tried to read other things to me. I wanted to read an encyclopedia at 5 years old, and so I was really into the idea of being like the idea of science. So I asked my dad. I was like, "Can I have either a microscope or a telescope? Either one is fine." So clearly my paths were chemistry and physics. And he bought me a telescope. So I always knew I wanted to do physics. I was really into space. And so then for GCSEs, I did physics and I did astronomy at GCSE. And so by the time I got to college, I was like head fast. I'm going to do physics and that's going to be my path. And so I had a brief moment where I was considering geoscience, and that was really helped by doing the work experience here because I got to actually experience and I realised how practical it is. But then I chose physics instead still because it's my first love and I can't let go of it.
That's where your heart is.
Yeah.
So in our department, we have a number of pathways in geosciences. Currently, there isn't a straight geology degree, but I think we're bringing one in this year. But we have a planetary science degree. So while Esther was here, she was obviously much more into I don't do any kind of astrophysics or planetary science, but work on similar minerals. So I took her to meet Katie Joy, who's a professor in our department, really impressive, very young professor who looks at meteorites. And so she gave you about
She let me hold
an
him.
hour or so.
That was
That is actually
that's
crazy.
all anyone heard from me
Okay.
for like the rest of like that summer was I had a real meteorite. That's all I could
Cool
say.
Yeah, I think she got
memory.
you to pick, didn't she? She
Yeah,
had a
she's like,
box
which
of
one is it?
ones.
That was yeah.
Oh, wait, she was kind of seeing if you could guess which one it was.
Yeah, because it was so impressive. Because obviously it is still just rocks, but just the idea of it is it's just so cool. It's like mind blowing
Yeah.
that you get to have. I think it's almost the idea you have access to things from such far away, and that we can research it and we can learn so much about our world and our universe. I just have so much respect and like love for the discipline. It's so cool.
Oh, Esther.
Manchester's also one of the main universities globally that gets like from the Osiris mission. So when they
Okay.
when they've sampled that asteroid recently, this is not my
yeah.
area, so sorry if I get it wrong to any of my colleagues, but they're the ones that get the samples from NASA. Cool.
When I moved jobs, it was around the time we were getting like some kind of mega meteorite pieces, and my colleagues were like, "Oh my god, can you show me what you see? Like, I'm so jealous. Can I come with you?" And I was
Really?
like, "I probably won't be seeing it, to be honest. I'll just be in the university." But I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to the uni where we've got the meteorites." I was like, "Yeah, really cool. It is really cool.
It is really cool.
It's very exclusive."
I
It
think
is exclusive, isn't it? And Katie also, because geology, and every geologist will have a story, but because everybody knows what a rock is, as soon as anyone knows you're a geologist, they're like, "I found this rock and I kept it for 20 years. Would you please have a look at it?" And I mean, anywhere you go, at parties.
Do people do that?
Oh, people always have rocks.
do you ever
and
find anything interesting?
Yeah, I do have some stories of actually some that led me onto a different path that an 8-year-old child found once. On a beach. So yeah, so sometimes. So Esther got to see a lot of meteorites that are not meteorites.
Yeah.
So Katie Joy had been like, ringing up all the time. "Can you come and look at? I think I found a meteorite in my garden." Vast amount of the time, it's not. I think they don't even necessarily follow up with most of them now. But no. So I, especially when you're doing field work, and a lot of my field work's on beaches, looking at cliffs, and I've been on beaches where everyone's like in bikinis, sunning themselves, and I'm there in all my field gear, looking looking at the rocks, measuring everything with a big rucksack on. It's not very cool. And so people are saying, "What are you doing?" And you're like, "Oh, geology." Sometimes if you talk, then they ask you what research, then you sort of give them a story. If you tell them too much, they get a bit bored. And if you're too engaging, then you get a stream of people and you're never getting anything done. So
They see you on the beach and they come over.
it's
just
and I found it. So we had one time I was working in a cave section in Scotland, and a man and his son came up and they said, "Oh, are you geologists?" "Yes, we are." And he said, "Oh, have you heard all about?" Started telling me about polar bears and bones in the caves. There's a lot of caves around this area, and I was like, "Oh, okay, right." And then some quite strange things. Sometimes people get into crystals and stuff, and you're like, "Okay, I'm gonna move on." I don't know anything about this. So, and he said, "Well, we found a really interesting rock," and I was like, "Yeah, okay." And I said, "Yeah, just leave it out for us, and we'll have a look." And so at the end of the day, me and my partner actually were walking down to the car, and there was a huge rock looming on the road, and we were like, "What's that?" on the path. And we got up, and it was a type of rock called a fault breccia. So it's when an earthquake has occurred deep under the ground, and the deformation has like blasted the rock apart. And so it was a beautiful rock full of sort of red iron and stuff. And it wasn't a rock that should be associated with the types of structures we were looking at. So it was a really new thing. And it had a little card on it, and it said, "From Donald, age 8.5." Aiming to be geologist, and and he had his number or his address, I think. So we wrote to him, and and then we published some of this stuff, and we acknowledged him, and I've always wanted to follow up with this lad and be like, "Did you ever do geology?" Because and he was spot on. And I think now I have 3 children, and my husband's a geologist. We really, and we do take them out in the field sometimes, just when we're on holiday. We can't stop looking at rocks. And they're really good because they're quite close to the ground, so they find stuff.
Yeah.
You're like scooting around trying to find a particular mineral for experiments. And
Physically,
I've got twins.
it's easier for them.
Physically, they're really close, and their eyes are better. And they're like, "Is this what you're looking for?" And you're like, "Absolutely, that is the lithium mica that we're after."
Oh.
With children, very helpful. I'm not endorsing kind of like
Not child labour.
the University of Manchester
to
shouldn't
work.
use child labour, but they're more helpful sometimes.
I love this idea of rocks in particular as like a connecting point between the two of you as well, because there's that immediacy, like you said, to rocks. Anyone can pick them up. Often it's a child that finds something that they think's intriguing and takes them to mum and dad, or if they have access, a geologist.
We've got
Any
a
children can come
geologist.
to the University of Manchester. We do have, we have a stream of rocks coming through the department and people being asked. So we're very open to the public coming in with stuff.
Yeah, and then we were talking about meteorites, and we're talking about things from space, and it almost looks like the same form again, and it's this kind of like reminder how connected everything is, which is so, I don't know, immediate and refreshing that it's so accessible, if that makes sense.
And free. You just go out, and I assume you would have probably had some rock or minimal collections.
Yeah, I did pick up rocks quite often. My mum's really clean though, so it was never getting to the bedroom. It was very much left at the front door.
On the step.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, that's a rock you found from the dirt. Don't know about that one. But no, I think that's what I love about how practical it is, because physics has this, like, it has this idea that it's very closed off and it's something a serious grown man has to do in a room by himself, and he needs a chalkboard, he's going to figure out the entire universe, when, like, realistically it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of practical doing things, and it can be done by anyone. And so that's why I really enjoy geoscience, and I really find a lot of respect to it, because it feels more like a field where people understand that anyone can do it and we're all a part of it, and that's what matters. And I hope physics gets more to that point, and we can kind of get rid of this idea that everything was discovered by one guy in a classroom and in Cambridge somewhere, where anyone can be a physicist and anyone can understand and apply themselves to it, because it is a really fun field. Like, it gets a lot of shtick for not being not being as fun, but I think we're a fun science. I think it has merit in a way that, like, every person can get into it, because we can all look outside and see the moon or see the stars, and, like, that means so much to society, and it has for the longest time, where, like, societies have been built around where the moon is and what it looks like, or constellations, and it's been this constant thread for the longest time in the world, but we still look at it like it has to be something that only a select few people can do, and it's too difficult for your average person to get into, which it's really not.
Oh, you said some really poetic things
Yeah.
there. I think when people think of physics, they think of the kit, which you can't access unless you're, like, super kind of high up in academia, or you've spent your life researching something.
Yeah.
I don't think people necessarily can see the path that physics leads you to in an easy way.
I don't think people think of it as practical either. You think of someone thinking a lot.
Like theoretical stuff. Yeah, like working stuff
doing
out.
a lot of thinking and not a lot of practical, but that's not the case.
Yeah, and I think obviously it's a really old field, so a lot of the practical things that you could do yourself has been done thousands of years ago by someone from 700 BC, because we've been working on it for a really long time. So a lot of the new experiments that you have to do is, like, theoretical nuclear physics, or I've forgotten the word, quantum physics. So, you know, we don't all have a particle accelerator in our back garden, so I can't go and look at that and, like, split the atom.
Yeah, fair.
So obviously there is a bit of a barrier. I don't know, maybe we can. I think we could build one.
Yeah.
But obviously sometimes there is a bit of a barrier, but it's understanding that, like, there's still merit in doing those practical experiments that have been done before, but try to see how you can understand it and how you could apply yourself to it, and falling in love with the process through that. And I think, it's just a shame that it just feels like something that you have to study your whole life for it. You have to be probably well off enough to be able to afford to stay at it, because it's not the most, like, lucrative career. Sorry.
Oh, academia.
Academia in general, not just physics. But
I was going to say, I think if you go into industry as a physicist, you're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, industry is definitely where the money is. But it's just there's a lot of barriers, I think. And there's why it goes into the representation type thing, where you don't see yourself in a lot of physics, because it is a difficult field to get into. And so you don't get as many women, you don't get many people of colour, you don't get many disabled people, just there's less opinions in it than that one idea of what should be a physicist.
Less diversity of opinion,
And so it almost in itself breeds that culture that only one person can get into it. So a lot of people look at it and they don't think that they could do it. I've met so many other girls who say they couldn't do physics or maths, but they're, like, so good at biology and chemistry. And that always, like, it always baffles me, because it's the same skills, and it's a really similar field. I can't remember who said this, but I think they explained that science is just the difference of scale, where physics is, like, a really large scale difference, and chemistry is a more particular scale, and biology is another particular scale. But overall, physics is chemistry and it is biology. There's a lot of overlap. And so it's just a shame that we've made this culture where people think they can't go into physics because of what we've said a physicist looks like, when they really could, and a lot of people I think would be really great at the field.
Esther, what year are you in?
I'm in first year.
You're first year?
You're so good at breaking down really complex things into like simple language.
You're also just so wise. Oh my god. Can you be my therapist? Oh my god.
Yeah.
I didn't realise you were first year.
I spend too much time thinking, I think. That's all. I just sit and think, and that's all I've got.
No, but you're really good at, for example, you're talking about physics, which is one of the very like mystified subjects. I think a lot of us see as being, like you say, like reserved for only the super intelligent, but you're very good at like making those concepts quite accessible. Like I feel like I'm following along.
As a scientist, I mean, I still think physics is like the hardest probably
Yeah,
to sciences, you know, next to maths. But I think because as well, there does seem to be more theory in it. It's like Esther said, it's based on fundamental laws, and a lot of those principles were established hundreds of years ago.
Yeah.
Some of the experiments, like splitting the atom, which happened at the University of Manchester, of course. Shout out. But yeah, well, those experiments, you know, were done long ago. So I think fundamental laws aren't established in science very often. Anything fundamental is generally already set up, apart from all this work on quantum physics. So, and that is, I mean, it is undeniable. It's very hard science. Yeah. It's sorry to say that, and I don't mean to put anyone off, but it is difficult. And Esther is, you know, a very gifted student. To have got to Manchester and to have got to do physics, she is exceptional. But as she says, she had a vision of where she wanted to be, and that helps you work hard at your A levels at those difficult bits. But I think so. And for mine side is because I did enjoy as a child finding things and being the first to discover things. That's where using the laws of physics, you can actually get data out of things like rocks.
Yeah.
If I'd been doing biology, I'd have also enjoyed that, you know, looking and doing experiments in that. I think any of the chemistry, biology, geology would have been good for me. I think I would have found physics harder because it's harder to break your own ground in it, I think, possibly.
The likelihood of getting anything named after you in physics is just gone. Most things are... I'm not going to say we know most things, because there's this... I can't remember his name. There's a physicist who very famously said, we know everything there is to know about physics, and all that's left is to get higher detail. And then I think a week later, they discovered that quantum physics existed. So...
that's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
I'm really embarrassed.
Yeah, guys, we're done. We finished it all, and then immediately someone like Einstein shows up.
What do you do at that point?
So I'm retiring.
Yeah, you quit.
You know, at that point you're thinking, it's probably time for me to move over.
Yeah. Let's write a book.
Oh my god, yeah.
Field.
Stepping aside.
A lot of things have been discovered in physics, and it's not every day that you can find something, unless, like, I mean, exoplanets, there's a lot of exoplanets to find, but that's kind of geoscience still. But, so it does get less of that instant gratification that you might get in biology or chemistry, where you can just discover something. I think that's one of the things I liked about physics, is I like the idea of building on knowledge. I'm completely fine with never discovering anything, but maybe something I wrote down years in the future, someone else will discover something from that. And the field itself it's built on everyone's back. It's so cumulative. It's such a team sport, but it has that idea of being one guy in a room, when it's never that. All the like the greatest physicists, they all worked and they're all interconnected, and it was, he read this person's book and then he worked with other person's work. I think it was Copernicus who came up with the heliocentric model. He came up with that, and then I think it was Kepler who used Tycho's... Is either Kepler used Tycho or Tycho used Kepler. Can never get the order right. But they used each other's research to like refine that model. And they're all in their rights individually great astrophysicists and physicists. But it was through that team effort over like 50, 60 years. And so I think physics does have... It is way more a team sport, but...
I love that, a team sport. My
That-
God, go Wildcats. I love that.
We're all in it together.
We are all in it
Because
together.
it sounds so like siloed, the work, or like I feel like people perceive it as like one
The
person
credit.
working. So yeah, rather
I
than
definitely
this-
think that about
Yeah,
physics.
I
Even
do.
physics TV programs, which I watch loads of them, but they do seem to be.
I absolutely agree. It's
Our
always
beloved
kind of
Brian Cox, so wandering around alone.
yeah, so true. There's
It
always a
doesn't-
figurehead, right?
Yeah,
But it's actually
definitely.
built
It's
on
community.
everyone.
Yeah, and to carry on the High School Musical theme, you have your Troy Bolton, so that might be Einstein or Brian Cox. But
Oh,
then
I
you still
never
have
thought we'd see that comparison.
Brian Cox and Troy Bolton are the same person. I'm saying it now.
The hair isn't too dissimilar.
You know what? I was thinking that.
It could happen.
sweet.
So who's Gabriella?
I guess Jeff Forshaw, because they do the module together. I guess
I love
they
that.
don't teach me
Insert
now, so they
images
can't
here.
get mad at me.
We
You've
do
been
like
told by
a
Brian Cox,
diagram.
Yeah, they do relativity and quantum in the semester. Thanks, guys, got a first. But yeah, so I think you get those really famous like figureheads, and I think that's really good for the field because it gets people like
Inspired.
yeah, and it inspires people, and regular people get interested in it. My friend from home absolutely hates physics. She just doesn't care for it. She's really into biology and chemistry, and she wants to go into like the medical field, but she hates physics. But she's obsessed with Brian Cox.
Really?
So that's the one connect. She's very mad at me because she realised after I finished getting taught by Brian Cox, I was being taught by him. She's like, why didn't you tell me?
I'd come for a selfie.
They would have come in.
I was like, I think I mentioned it. I swear I did. But I think, yeah, physics, we have a lot of really famous physicists who happen to be men. But I think there is...
Damn.
But it's good for the
These
field to have.
systems.
Yeah, it just...
It's changing though. It's
It
changing,
is.
and women have always been there,
Yes.
like you said, taking part in the work.
Yes.
Not being-
A lot of the time behind the scenes. Geology is the same. I mean, that's a really male-dominated field
Yeah.
traditionally, especially in the Victorian times when everyone was like an amateur geologist going around. But in the last sort of 2 decades, people have really done work to show who these women were who were wandering around in the Scottish Highlands, you know, coming up with the theory of plate tectonics. The people like Peach and Horn were mapping, basically. Geological mapping is what has allowed us to understand how the Earth works and therefore how other planets work as well. But there was always women in the background in these black and white photos in long skirts, you know, hiking around. And actually, it turns out they were doing lots of the work, you know. They were also mapping and contributing in big ways. And, you know, it's just that at the time they weren't acknowledged for it. It's all for the men. And I think women have always been there in the background.
Yeah. It's the exact same in physics.
Almost,
Yeah,
certainly must be.
especially in astrophysics and astronomy, we had like the computers who were a team of women who did all the calculations, and
We've literally got a like hidden figures book up here.
Hidden figures. They were another group. They worked with NASA, and it's constantly where women were relegated to work on calculations, and then would discover things. So pulsars, and they were discovered by women in. I don't know any dates. I'm not a historian, but but so many contributions to these fields were from women, but they were overlooked. Yeah. And there's so many times where you look back at some famous physicist and you'll find out his wife was also a physicist.
That's really common. Yeah.
Really
Although
common.
actually most geologists are, lots of them, us, including me, are married to geologists. But that's usually because you just spend a lot of time in the desert,
lab,
and, you know, under the stars.
And it's
kind
similar,
of romantic.
similar interests and stuff and passions, right? It
You
makes
do,
sense.
yeah, and you do. Field work tends to throw people together, but
And
but it's interesting. Physicists married to physicists.
Yeah,
and-
you
and
get a lot of
finding-
it. And so then it'll be, oh, this person was the greatest mathematical mind. And then you find out, like, well, his wife was also there while he was writing this paper. And
Yeah.
she
Oh, and
Yeah.
the contribution was
contributed quite a
massive.
bit to it.
Like Einstein.
Yeah, Einstein's wife was...
no, honestly, it's like across all industries as well. This happens. Think about even in art, like Picasso. Like there's always some wife in the background who's also creating incredible work. Often a muse or the person which you're bouncing ideas off, and then they just never get any credit. For it.
Ghostwriter.
Yeah,
Whilst looking after the
essentially.
kids quite often.
Whilst also doing everything else.
Or finding rocks in big long skirts.
I know, the big long skirts.
Sounds
quite
quite
funny. I mean,
difficult.
they're properly up Munros in big long skirts.
Oh
Which, you
my
know,
God.
what did he say? The Fred Astaire thing, the Ginger Rogers, the dancers. Fred Astaire is obviously considered the greatest dancer of all time, but Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in heels.
Yeah.
It's like, well, these
Yeah.
Victorian geologists were doing it in massive skirts
Yeah.
and probably bodices and, you know.
Doing it corsets and everything.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah, it's a culture change that's needed, isn't it?
Thank God for trousers.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be doing that even in this skirt.
No.
But this
it's nice
is
that you
making me feel like
can.
spring. So, yeah,
Nice that
it's nice that you can.
You've got the option now.
Yeah, I think there's there's a long way to go, isn't there? I mean, we're looking back and we've come a long way, but we're still on a journey in terms of changing, like, who are those figureheads that, you know, the famous physicists, there still are the majority of those are men. So we're
I think
kind of
in
working.
physics there's been a lot more sexism issues as well. I mean, there's been a lot outed in the last few decades, and there has been in geoscience globally. There's been,
oh, really?
Yeah, and particular big named men who have held back women, or I don't know, their treatment of women in their labs.
Yeah.
And this will be in all sciences, has made women think, do you know what, this isn't for me at postdoc level. So they've got the PhD, they're heading towards independent research, and then they're working for a PI, a principal investigator. So that's like the boss of a lab who is super sexist or treats them a certain way, and they think, I've had enough of this, I'll go into industry. They probably then go on and have a great life, but we lose them to academia.
It wasn't their choice, really.
Yeah. And that is just a few people, but one PI who is in charge of, can be tens and hundreds potentially of people, can really make a big dent,
Are there groups, are there like kind of community building initiatives nowadays that kind of help negate those sorts of...
There is in academia, and certainly in geoscience is different. I'm a member of a Geoscience Women's Network, which is global, but it's largely focused on America. I mean, a lot of stuff comes out of America, ironically, at the moment. A lot of the initiatives for gender equality come out of there for conferences and things. Yeah, and, provide things like providing childcare at conferences was something that was being done in America way before it was... I mean, I was the one that suggested it for the GeolSoc here, the London Geological Society, that they put some kind of care on, so that, because I knew quite a lot of women from West Africa who were doing PhDs when I was at the University of Aberdeen, they would tend to come over and leave their husbands behind, and they would come and do a PhD, but they would bring the children. And of course, they were doing their PhD work and wanted to present at conferences, but they didn't have any family support to go to a conference, even in London. And so the GeolSoc put some childcare on, and it just meant they weren't babies or anything, they were bigger children. Although some were actually quite young toddlers, and then therefore they could be at the conference, they could present their results, which is huge in a PhD.
Participate.
It's a big part of of science, sharing what you're doing. But the GeolSoc kind of just hadn't considered it at the time. But you're pushing on an open door. In my experience, quite often you say you do need to go to people with a suggestion. If you say there's not enough being done, nothing goes. You need to say there's not enough being done. Here's what I suggest, and this is what it will cost.
Yeah.
And here's what the outputs will be. And generally, people are like, "Oh, sounds good."
More receptive.
I would say in industry, I was in the oil and gas industry for 4 years before doing my PhD. At that time there was far less support, and that was in the 2010s. There wasn't women's groups. I experienced sexism at work and sexual harassment at work. And in a small company. Yeah, it wasn't massively upsetting, just somebody who wouldn't stop putting his arm around me, and I don't know what reason it was, and I said I didn't like it, and then he kept doing it. So, and actually a friend of mine who was a lawyer said, you should get out and sue them, and so I thought no, because I was very concerned I'd get blacklisted. My future was in industry at the time. I don't even know if blacklisted was a thing, but from my background, my parents are working class, and they were like, just get on with working, keep your head down. And so
there's this culture where you don't want to kick up a fuss.
No, whereas now I'd be like, right, kicking up a fuss, And I think some of that is probably after doing my PhD. I was like, I can say things, and people will listen, and I didn't feel that in industry. So no, and had there been a women's group, say I'd stayed in industry, I would have set up a group, especially for young women going into oil and gas or into those kind of industries, where you go to another place and live alone, and you're creating a new network. It's really important that someone can go, I feel uncomfortable with this. Is this okay or not? Because I think that was my thing with this guy. He was much older. He was like 50, and I was mid-20s. I was like, is this okay? Am I being too fussy? Like, because other people didn't mind having a hug off him, but I was like... So I had to say things like, I'm not very tactile, whereas I should have just been like, back off,
Don't touch me.
So just those
you were really softening how you felt by saying things like, I'm not very tactile.
I was trying to say it's my fault that I don't want to be hugged by a colleague. But I just, so I didn't know, and it would have been helpful. And I would hope nowadays in industry, a lot has changed since 2010, I would say. I mean, a friend of mine went to work for a big oil company who's known as a very friendly oil company after her. Some companies are the more Scandinavian ones are more kind of, right on. Sure. And she got taken for a weekend where you had to be taught what drinks to take if you're with other industry people, and women weren't allowed pints, which for me from Manchester, I was like, no, I could never work for this company. You had to have a long drink so you didn't get too drunk, and all sorts of things like that. And also there was, to meetings you should wear stockings, although I did wonder if there was a...
Wait, when?
I know.
Was this?
This is 2010. And I won't name the company because that wouldn't be good for university. I think it might have been a translation issue. I think it might have meant tights. Which is what we, but I was also like, but they should wear skirts, you know.
Oh, dear.
I was like, I was scandalised by that. But then of course my friend's just got a high paying job after a master's, and she's like, you know, it's just what you got to do. So yeah, there's a lot of sexism in geoscience as well. Just a little bit different. I'm not sure if you've been told what to wear during physics.
Not yet.
So
hopefully never.
Hopefully never. I keep that away from that. But I imagine it's probably, I think one thing I find is that a lot of the times, like earlier on, they're a lot less bad. I think because they know that, we need to get more women into it, women in STEM and that whole thing. And so they do focus on younger people. Like, it's great, it's amazing, you'll love it. You'll have all this support. And then when you look further down the line, you're starting to see, well, okay, you're telling me it's great and I can do this and I'm capable. Okay, amazing. How come half of the women are dropping out, like, post-grad? And how come there's so few at these higher level positions? What's happening to them that's making them leave the career?
Can you sustain this energy?
Yeah, is this going to keep going?
Yeah.
Or is it just talk?
So I'm very lucky and very fortunate that I've had like a good support system, and I've had all these resources built off the back of women who didn't. But I know that it's probably gonna run out at some point, and I am gonna get to points where I don't have the support I'm needed, because there still is a culture around it, and there still is an attitude around it, and I think we've got to an insidious point where a lot of like people in charge or the people around it think that they've done enough. So when you point out that it's not enough, you seem like the problem, because they're like, oh well, but we're inclusive and we've got this percentage of people in it and we meet all these points. So at this point, you're just complaining you can't do it. But there's little insidious parts, and there's little like small things that might be really detrimental to women in a field that they wouldn't get. Like something like not having childcare at a conference. That to me seems like a no-brainer, because why would you not give that opportunity to someone? But the fact that I think it's the fact that you have to ask for things now.
People just don't think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I love going to conferences now and being away from my 3 children. Getting a night in a hotel, I'm just like, yes. You know, anything I want on the telly. But it is, if, you know, there are women without support networks to be able to look after them. Like you say, it's just lack of imagination, I think, sometimes.
Like doing the bare minimum and being like, maybe we've achieved this and this.
I don't think they mean to. I think it's literally lack of imagination. Sometimes lack of funding. But the money can often be found because there's new initiatives.
I think a lot of the time as well, it's just you only see the challenges that you experience yourself.
Exactly.
So if you're a man in this scenario, you may not think of that if that's not something you have to deal with. So you have to kind of like fill the room with people who have different challenges, so they can tell and inform whoever it is that's making those decisions.
Yeah, and hopefully
be making those decisions at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, the University of Manchester has a scheme now for this funding for conferences that you can take a partner with you, I think, to cover, or it covers some childcare. Maybe the childcare is covered back at home, but I've heard about schemes where you could take, your mum with you, or a family member, or your partner to a conference that they're looking after the child, because you might be breastfeeding or stuff like that. I mean, I've certainly been breastfeeding at a conference, and my mum came in Edinburgh when I was at Aberdeen, gave my talk and then nipped back out again, and.
That's amazing, because you can still do.
I was the first person, I think, in that setting to have done that, and I actually then won an award at the dinner, but I wasn't at the dinner because I'd gone home with my child back to Aberdeen, and I got a phone call, and I was like literally nursing my first daughter, Katrina, and he was like, "Oh, you've won this medal from the Geological Society," and I was like, "That's great," but I was also like, "Oh, I should have been there."
Yeah.
But I mean, there's only certain places I wouldn't have taken a baby to. An evening meal for a geologist, because they get quite raucous. So that would not be the right.
Maybe would be bored.
But I did hope back then, that was at the end of my PhD, that other people at the start of their PhD, other women might see that and go, do you know what? No, I could take a child to a conference, and this is doable, and it's not the most straightforward thing, but Yeah, I think being visible, certainly, and
Yeah.
trying to do stuff and be out there, and also explain. I've had a really unusual career progression because I've had 3 children, one during my PhD, and then I had twins during my postdoc. And it's not common, really, in geoscience. So then I've always worked part-time for 10 years. Again, that's
a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of
During your
balancing.
PhD
Lots
as
of
well.
balancing, yeah.
Yeah, at one point we had 3 children in private nursery, so we were paying, me and my husband, like £600 more a month than I earned for me to carry on my postdoc.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, I could have quit, but at that point I wouldn't have been able to go on and get a fellowship. So I must say, again, I say about knocking on open doors. At that time, there was an oil company group of companies that gave out money for research. They'd give out £2,000 grants. So I contacted them and I said, I'll come and give you a talk on my research if I can have the £2,000, but can I just use it all on childcare? And they said, yeah, sure.
Really?
Because I was like, I need to finish writing my thesis and I can't afford childcare and nursery fees, and can I do this? And they said, yeah, and they gave me £2,000. And I mean, that was an evil oil company, but they will do stuff if you suggest things.
Yeah.
They're open. It's wording it, and it's also learning what other people have done. So that is a precedent now. And I suggest to loads of people, ask people for money and say it's for childcare,
That's really good that that's starting to be the norm, I guess, or more normalised.
I think if people hear about it,
Yeah.
then they know they can ask. We get a lot of applications to the lab from people wanting to come and work in the Rock Defamation Lab. And we had Esther's for the Nuffield Scheme, and the Nuffield Scheme person said, this person's written this application. It is a bit unusual, even the Nuffield Scheme person thought it was. And I said, all right. And then I read it, and wow. And I had to then reread it. I was thinking, never read anything quite like this. And it was one of the most impassioned arguments about why Esther wanted to come and do science that I've ever read. And it was kind of, for a scientist, it was also like, oh my goodness, it's so passionate. And it had all of Esther's poetic commentary about her inspiration of the stars and space and the things that she loved. And also that it said that she was studying art at A-level, physics, maths, and I think English literature at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this person is so on my street. Because I had to do 3 years at school and messed up a little bit. So I ended up going to night school at Wigan, which is actually where Esther had been. I used to drive there from Manchester. And so I ended up with lots of A-levels and also did art subjects and science. And it's not very common. And I thought, I've got to meet her because she's just... It was also quite stream of consciousness, the letter. And I just thought it was one of the most unusual but quite inspiring things.
Yeah.
And I thought
So
she's
it was
either going to come
artistic.
and be really, really...
Gifted.
No, I think we looked at it in the lab and we were like, she's either going to be, all crystals and stuff and, and she'll be... kind of into like healing or something, or she's going to come and be really good. And so Esther came, and I think her, like I say, she works on the electron microscope, which even undergraduates don't get to do usually. And she grasped the concept of how it works very quickly. And I think because she's an artist, being able to draw things and understand diagrams.
And you love that kind of
herself.
drawing within science with mapping and
so a lot of geology is drawing and interpreting processes and so chemical processes and physical processes through drawing and sketching, and that's what geological mapping is. And so my mum was an art teacher, so I do a lot of art. I used to do like life drawing classes and things like that, and it always gave me a real leg up in the
life
field.
drawing class in this space.
It's very relaxing. But yeah, so it gave me a leg up in the field because I was very confident to draw and express what I was feeling. And even now, when you come to the end of running complex chemistry experiments on rocks, the big bit at the end of your publication is to be able to draw what you're showing, because so all of our figures ingrained. We have to do it, and it's a really real skill. It's not just all graphs. You want to really be able to draw a model of something and
communicate what you've
happening.
seen, what you've found.
Yeah, and I think like Einstein said the greatest scientists are artists or something. Yeah. So it's if he's saying it, then it was pretty good.
And you draw, don't you, Esther?
Yeah,
and you love sculpture. Am I right?
Yeah, I got into sculpture during my A level. I was like also always into art, but my mum was very arty, my dad was very sciencey, and I just got both. And so when it came to picking A levels, I didn't know if I wanted to go into art or science. I was more leaning towards science, but I still wanted to keep going with it. And so I went to a lot of colleges and applied and asked if I could do physics and art, and a lot of them were like, No.
Oh.
You should be doing sciences, which does make sense because to apply for a lot of degrees in sciences, you have to have multiple sciences. So there's some unis I couldn't go on their physics course because I only did physics and maths. Because they didn't really consider or care for my other A levels.
Missed out.
Yeah.
Big time.
So that's why I went to the college I went to, because they were really open about me doing art and literature and physics and maths. And
Can I just say, I love that you took control of that situation and thought, no, I'm not just going to take it that teachers
not
are
compromising.
saying I have to do this set path. I want to do my own route. I really love that you did that and you kind of shopped around.
Yeah, as much as I respect chemistry, I was never going to do it again. So it was very much, that I didn't want to do computer science, so I was like, I'm going to have to figure out a way to be able to still do art. And so I've always felt very much that I think it's really important that you have those aspects, especially when it comes to science. And I think we lost that a long time ago, Copernicus revolution, and we were all like, science is hard and fast and you can't have any philosophical thinking towards it. And so, yeah, I do realise that I'm a bit unconventional when it comes to my approach to science sometimes, and I do get very stream of consciousness and poetic with how I approach it. But I think it just comes from, like, I just really love it in the same way that I do love art and I love literature. And so I just have to approach it in the same way. And I think I'm better off for it rather than it's all numbers and it's all like clear cut. I think that's a boring way to look at it. I don't think
The creativity, when you get to the higher levels, especially if you're in academia, the creative thinking is really needed. You've got to, and the ability to write is really needed. So things like English literature are super helpful, and history, anything where you've been able to put your thoughts onto paper. Being able to run experiments is key in the empirical side, but being able to write and being able to express yourself in drawings is surprisingly useful.
It's so interesting as well. Physics and art is kind of like, physics is like you're understanding why we're here, maybe, but art is what gives life so much meaning on a personal level. And so it's like, it's really nice that you get to do both of those things.
Yeah, that love of literature and art that you have, as both of you have just kind of pointed out, that brings so much life and passion to kind of the area which you're specialising in. So you can before I was like, wow, you're really inspirational how you talk. That love of literature and art will only be helping you with that. So if you were to go into a career where you needed to convince people to why what you're doing matters,
which is all of academia.
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely, that's what professors have to do. Otherwise, you don't get published.
Makes you kind of a perfect fit, right?
Yeah, I think it's so helpful because you go into academia and it's a place where niche interests matter so much. And it's just trying to beg for people around you to be like, no, I swear this is really cool and it's really interesting. Yeah. I love my flatmates because they put up with me bringing up the most weird, non-important physics facts. And I'm like, and it's connected to this guy who did this thing and and there's this, and it's all so interesting to me. And I think that's why it's so important to be into the arts and like the humanities, because it's that understanding that what you have and what you know and your passion for it, that makes it important in itself. Like, it's that idea of, you're going to go into physics and you need to discover something that's going to earn someone money. I think that's so boring. We used to just do physics because we could. That was before we even had like laws and countries. We just fought because we wanted to understand things. That's the natural human instinct. And so I think any form of research in any field is so important, even if it's like the history of the letter E in books, or if it is a planet. Both are like equally important because it's just important to know things. That's my spiel.
That is obviously beautiful. It's a lovely note to end on as well.
It is a lovely note to end on. Do you want to ask that one question before we wrap? Are you trying to check the time?
Yeah, we got 4 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so we've been trying out just asking kind of random questions at the end, just to kind of say goodbye on. And today we were going to ask, if your life was a genre right now, what do you think it would be? And I'll start. I think mine is a romance. Maybe a rom-com. Maybe like an artsy romance, because I'm very creatively fulfilled right now. I'm doing lots of like painting, lots of my own writing projects, as well as this project, which is huge and all-consuming in many ways. So yeah, I'm just in a happy, romanticized place.
Love that. I feel like mine's coming of age movie.
Okay.
Age 26, still coming of age.
Always coming into an age.
That's true. You just like figuring things out. Things go wrong. I saw Bridget Jones the other day, the new one, and I was just like, God, she's so relatable on so many levels. I feel like she's still coming of age. But yeah, coming of age, figuring things out, making mistakes. But
It's probably not true, but I always feel like my life is a thriller. Like I feel like something's gonna happen. I'm sure it's not, but I'm like waiting for something looming. I don't know. I imagine it's probably something simple like coming of age, I think. Or
maybe it's all the asteroid stuff you've been learning.
yeah,
You've been
maybe
doing
like one of those sci-fi thriller type
oh my God,
things. I'm gonna
sense of peril at all times.
yeah, just impending doom. Maybe I'm gonna like just be in an election. I'm gonna be like, oh wow, the world is gonna end. It's gonna be what's that film? 2012.
2012.
That's
Yeah.
the one.
Wow, that's very
Yeah.
highly watched in my parents' house. We
watched
were
that
talking
quite
about
often.
Twister and Dante's Peak. All of those disaster films, anything about like climate and things, we're all over
Day After
it
Tomorrow.
in my family. Day After Tomorrow is so good.
Oh my God.
The icy bit when he comes out of the caravan and just freezes. Do you remember that?
I have watched a lot of them.
I'm pretty sure like after I saw that film, I like wrote a will. Like age 8. Just the impending climate crisis.
Yeah, that was very impactful for me at a young age as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Twister was my number one, I think.
Natalie?
But yeah, impending doom isn't a great note.
Just whatever, it's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, my favourite film to watch is like rom-coms. I think at some point when we've been interviewed before, Dirty Dancing is actually my absolute all-time favourite film.
I remember that.
I even named my son Patrick. I know. You think we're like he's named after some kind of scientist. Patrick.
Yeah, we'll find the scientist to fill it in.
Patrick Swayze, actually.
Not Patrick Swayze.
Just love him. Yeah, but in terms of what my life is like, I would hope it's like some kind of science fiction film, you know. I don't actually work in paleo with dinosaurs, but Jurassic Park would be very exciting. I would like to be, I mean, I actually wasn't my favourite in the film, but I would like to be like the Jeff Goldblum character.
Yeah?
Just sitting as all the disasters striking. Life will find a way.
What is Jeff's role in that film?
He's like a mathematician, isn't he?
Is
He works in chaos
I
theory.
just thought he was there for the vibe.
Just to throw him in.
No, he's like the real genius type, you know.
Oh, you're definitely
working out.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
I would
you
hope
then.
I would be
Jeff.
just like overseeing kind of from the. But
He always has a little
got
quip.
that big love for Jurassic Park and Twister.
Wow, we've definitely run over, but I've loved this so much. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you so much, guys. It was
This was
so
great.
good.
Thank you for having us. Very nice.